If you're new to Airtable, you do not need to learn all of the Airtable fields in order to be effective building your first database. In fact, most bases in Airtable rely on the same 10 or so fields, and today I'm showing you the 10 key Airtable fields that you should master first, and why they help you unlock about 80% of everything you could build in Airtable. So if that's of interest, stick around, and let's get into it. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Gareth, and this is Gap Consulting. It's my mission to help you unlock the full potential of Airtable and the related no-code tools in this space. And in this video, as I said, we're going to be diving in for beginners the first 10 fields that you should master. Now, before we get to the heart of the video, I first want to call out that we are offering free strategy sessions to anyone building in Airtable now. If you're struggling to understand what your next best move is, our strategy session is going to get you on track. We'll talk through your goals and put together a roadmap to help you figure out your next few steps to get your Airtable solution up and running. So if that's of interest, swing by our website, sign up, answer a few quick questions, and pick the date and time of your strategy session that we will hold online in person with you. But without further ado, let's get to the topic at hand. And first, why does this matter? Why do you need to know and have the right Airtable fields in your databases when you're building? Well, the thing is, Airtable is a database. It's not a spreadsheet. And as a result of that, field types are going to determine the behavior, the integrity, the automation potential that you put together inside of your Airtable base. Beginners can sometimes just type whatever they want into a text field and hope for the best. And it's not best practice, because if you are able to really lean into the proper data types, you're going to get way more out of Airtable as a tool. So let's break it down one field at a time, and we're going to dive into my simple database that I've put together for us, where I'm going to highlight these different fields. So really quickly, high level, we have two tables. I've got project objects and I have task objects. So projects 1 through 3, you can see them here, and tasks. These tasks are associated with the project, they each have a due date, etc. Let's talk through the different fields that we've used here, one at a time. Number one, possibly the most important field type in all of Airtable, is the linked field. That's what we have right here from our projects table, linking to tasks. Now, if I click into here, you can see the settings that we've selected. And you'll see these options every time you build a link to another table. So first thing to understand is we are connecting two separate objects, projects, tasks, and we're getting them to talk. And so here it's asking us, can a project, because we're in the project object, the project table, can a project link to multiple tasks? And usually the answer to one of these questions is going to be yes. So in the case of ours, a project can have multiple tasks. So make sure that's on. Then we can limit what we can select. If you want to select it to a view or limit it to a view, you can also filter down your record options based on a condition. So this is really helpful if you don't want people to be able to link to all of your tasks, but you want to filter it down to a limited selection. Use these two options here, either limiting to a view or limiting to a condition. Then lastly, we have this new update here from AI where we can use AI to show top matches when we're selecting a record. Now, in the case of a linked record, when we create a link from projects to tasks, like in our example, then we get the reciprocal of that relationship, because a link is a two-part equation. So now tasks are also linked to projects. So we have to come in and ask ourselves the same question about linking. So usually for this example, a task will only associate with a singular project, but a project will have multiple tasks. So this is how we show that to our database. Project, or rather a task, links to one project, so we don't have it multiple here. And we'll confirm that change. But on the project side of things, linking to multiple tasks is totally normal. So this is how we build a linked relationship. Now, the biggest mistake that we see beginners doing when they're building is using a single select field instead of a link. If you need to know more information about the thing you're linking to, you don't want to use a drop-down like a single select, which we're going to show you in just a moment. So if you need more information about that linked relationship, about that thing, don't use a drop-down, use the link. This way we know everything about the tasks, and from the task side, we know everything about the projects that we're linked to. And I'll show you exactly what I mean in our upcoming fields that we showcase, but just know that the biggest mistake that you can make in setting up in the beginning stages is to use a single select field when you should be using a linked relationship. Now let's talk about single select. What exactly is it? Well, we have one in our tasks table, and it is a single select field that basically we list out a bunch of options, and only one of these can ever be selected at a time. So this field is really, really helpful whenever you're building a status or something where you need to track, various stages. So you'll see it very commonly used for things like tasks, where we say, oh, well, it's either in progress or it's an overdue or something like that. We can also set defaults here. So if you want it to be defaulting to a specific status every time a new record is created, you can select a default. We can also choose to color code our options or not, and we can control each one of those colors within reason. We can select here and change the language of each one of these, and we can add options or remove them. And we can also reorder these components as well by clicking and dragging. Now, the biggest mistake that beginners will see when they're using this field is not using a single select field, but using free floating text instead. So if you find yourself typing the same things over and over again, like if you were to use a text field for the status and you said in progress, complete, and you kept typing those words, well, if it's always limited to the same number of options, you probably need a single select field, so make sure to look for that flag when you're building. Now for the third most valuable field, and that is, in my opinion, a lookup field. So really quickly, let's rewind here to projects, and you'll see that each project has someone assigned to it, right? I've assigned myself to this project. Now what I want to do is, on my tasks table, know who is in charge of the project. This is a lookup field. It allows us to reach through the linked relationship and pull back information that we had on the other record. So in this case, we're linked to project 1. The person in charge of project 1 is me. So I can't actually edit this right here. It's inherited from the linked relationship. If I change this to be a different project, then the person in charge changes as well, because this is completely dependent on looking at this project and pulling back the person in charge right here. So this field type is really, really valuable when you're trying to get information that is a layer or two deeper in your Airtable base based on a linked relationship. So if you ever need to pull that information through to another database layer, then this is your go-to. It's the lookup. Now, the biggest mistake that we see people doing with this in the early stages is using an array of some sorts, using a rollup field or some other form rather than the lookup, which presents the data back in the exact same way that it was showing on the other page. So if you're looking at multiple things, a lookup will convert it to an array. So you'll see basically an array that's separated by commas, but in the case where you want to look up a single individual thing, that's where this field really shines the most. Now, very similar to the lookup field is our fourth field that you really should master as you're building out and learning in Airtable. This is the rollup field. So just how the lookup field allowed us to reach through a linked relationship and pull information back, so does the rollup field, but with one very distinct difference. The rollup field allows us to do something to that data with some kind of a formula. So let's take an example here. Let's bump this one back to project 1. And now I have 2 different tasks associated with project 1, and they have varying amounts of estimated time commitments, 1.5 hours and 2 hours. So we would know that, hey, we've got 3.5 hours worth of work assigned for project 1, right? But we won't actually see that number unless we use a rollup field. So that's what we have here in our projects side of things. We've built a rollup field type. Again, it looks at a linked relationship. In this case, it looks at our link to tasks, and we are doing something. This is the information that we are pulling back in. But here at the bottom, we're telling it to do something to that field. So in our case, we're summing the estimated hours that we found through the link to tasks. So if you remember, we have one task for 1.5 hours, another task for 2 hours. Obviously, that's going to sum to 3.5 hours. Now, we can also stipulate things like only include tasks that meet specific conditions. So for our example, I'm calculating the estimated effort remaining on a project. So if a task is complete, I don't want to use the estimated amount of time in this calculation. So let's take a look at how this works in practice. I'm going to go back to my tasks and actually update the status here to complete. So now, in terms of the outstanding tasks that are not yet completed for project 1, I just have this one that's in progress and it has 2 hours. And so the Rollup field is now reflecting just the 2 hours because of the fact that I added that filter here to say I only want to include certain records that meet or don't meet conditions. So this is the Rollup field. It allows you to reach through to linked records, evaluate some information from them, and do something. So in this case, a sum, or perhaps an average, or take the maximum value or the minimum. There are many different aggregation formulas that you can use, including some for text if you're working within arrays. So check out and master the Rollup field in your builds to pull in better information from other data objects or data tables. Now, the biggest mistake that beginners will use here is not using the Rollup field, but instead to just, try to key in these values. But that is requiring you to have duplicative data entry. So when you're using Airtable, always ask yourself, if you're entering the same information in multiple places, you probably could stand to improve your build. And in this case, if we were entering the text here for the estimated effort remaining, and we were entering the text here for the estimated hours, it's redundant. We don't need it. Use a Rollup field or some other type of field that will calculate the value for you. Now, on that topic, let's talk about the formula field. This is our 5th big takeaway field that we need to master when we start building an Airtable. This is an example of the formula field, and it can do a ton. We can work formulas into dates, we can play with numbers, we can work with text. Formula fields are very, very versatile, and we can do practically any calculation with them within reason. Now, they're very similar to spreadsheets, with the exception that when we write a formula in Airtable, it references an entire field, not a specific cell. And that is a big adjustment to you if you're coming from a spreadsheet mindset. But here, I've written a formula that says if a due date exists, then I want to perform this math and calculate how many days away the due date is. Basically, I want to know how much further before this thing becomes due. And so as of my recording, it's November 16th. You can see that on my November 19th, it's calculating 3 days. For November 26th, calculates 10, as you would expect. For the 25th, it calculates 9 days. And so this is going to always update daily, right? It's going to show me, hey, if there is a due date, this is how many days away it is. If the due date is somehow in the past, let's say a week ago, that number will be negative. But I could write this formula however I wanted. I could flag this, I could flip it around and change the negatives to positives. Really, a formula is as complicated as you want to make it. Now, the biggest mistake that you'll see with formulas is not considering all of the options that go into a formula. So for example, you'll notice that I said, only in the case where there is a due date do I want to perform this math. What if I left this part of my formula out? What if I just performed the math on my due date? Well, I know that that's going to force errors in my formula because I've been doing this for quite a while. But if I were a beginner, I would now be wondering what in the world NaN means. And frankly, it means not a number. It's not able to calculate because I've taken the due date away. And so I don't want the formula to work in cases where the number is out or data is missing. And so the biggest error that we see in formulas really comes down to not thinking the formula all the way through and accounting for the variable or the fringe cases that might happen if people don't fill out all the information. Now we are 5 down, halfway done, but the remaining 5 are pretty simple. They are all data types, different types of information that you'll want to keep inside of your Airtable base. So let's go break those down one at a time. First, we have the number field. We've already shown our estimated hours and how we summed them through our rollup field, but that summation was driven by this estimated hours field that we have on our tasks table. It's a number field type, very similar, by the way, to the currency field type. This is another option. It's another number field type. It's just that this shows up with a currency, right? Instead of a number. You'll see your currency symbol, whether that's the dollar, the euro, or some other currency. You'll see that, and generally it presets to a 2 decimal place. But similarly with the hours that we had, just being a basic number field, we can choose a basic preset. If we're working with very large numbers, we might want to see them in the millions, for example. We can also choose the number of decimal places, how we are going to use commas and periods, whether we are using a European style, an American style, or something in between. We can also choose a large number abbreviation, whether or not we're going to allow for negative numbers, and if we want to include a default system or default value. Now, similarly to this one, we have dates. Again, it's a type of data that we're dropping into our database. In this case, we use the date option. We can opt for time or not. We can opt to show the time zone, and we can default it to a current date. Next, we are going to look at our collaborator field type. We briefly examined this one earlier. This is specific to Airtable users and who has access to either our Airtable database or our associated Airtable interface. The user field type, or the collaborator field type, gives us the following options. Can multiple people be assigned here? And then secondly, do we send a notification to people when they're added? Now, the Airtable collaborator field, or the user field, this is super valuable when we are building interfaces if we want to filter data for our different team members. So maybe we're assigning projects to users. When they log in, we only want them to see their projects. This is how we control that. We assign the user here, and then we build filters in our interfaces to filter in only the stuff that we are assigned to, and it gives us a condensed version. You don't want your team looking at tens of thousands of records, only the stuff that matters for their day-to-day operation. Number 9 is the last modified or created. These are 2 different fields, but they're very similar. They capture metadata. Created time is going to tell us when a record came into existence. We can't change this. We can just choose if we're going to include time or date only, if we're going to show the same time zone for all collaborators, and if we're going to even show the time zone. And we're also looking at the last modified. This can choose between looking at all of the records or just specific fields within a record. For example, we might want to know, when did we last change the person in charge of a project? If we want to see that, we simply select that field and save the last modified time. And again, we can't actually edit this field. This is metadata. It knows when someone last updated it. And if I were to change somebody and assign someone else, you'll see that it updates here on the last modified to reflect the most recent change. Now for our 10th and final field type, it is the attachment field type. This is a very versatile field because we can put practically any kind of file in Airtable within reason. Now, Airtable does have a limitation to the amount of data that it will allow us to store. So be thoughtful about what plan you're on and what the limitations for your Airtable plan are. But in general, most attachments that are not incredibly robust, that are relatively smaller files, things like PDFs, JPEGs, PNGs, they store really nicely here. Now, something I don't usually upload to Airtable directly is more robust files like video files. This video that we're recording right now, as an example, I don't actually bring it into Airtable. Instead, I store it in Google Drive and I share the Google Drive folder link back to Airtable so that my team can quickly and easily access the files. But because the files are so big, it's just easier usually to link out to an external file storage for that. But for simple, smaller files, no problem. And Airtable just stores it. Like here's a sample, right? To make this even better, Airtable has what they call versions as well. So for versions, if we upload multiple versions, we actually see the versions and we can track them side by side in the same component. So if I had multiple files here, I could see them side by side, and this attachment field with the versioning turned on would allow me to see changes between the two files. So I can track over time how a contract or an agreement evolves. This is super valuable if you're doing any kind of contract or agreement storage in Airtable, but the attachment field is not just limited to that. It can hold pretty much any kind of file. So that's it. Those are your 10 basic field types for Airtable to help you start building better and stronger databases. I hope you got a ton of value from this video, and as I called out at the top, if you need help putting together your next steps with Airtable, swing by our website and grab one of our free strategy sessions. We'd be happy to connect with you and help get you on the right track. If you enjoyed this, we'd love a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. But of course, the most important thing, keep on building.